I have 3 screws with their heads removed that I use as an alignment tool to help me get these components back together. There are 4 holes, but I only need 3 in order to line the pieces up well, so I use 3. There's no future in doing more work than you have to. It sits just there like that. This shim goes on here like this. On top of the shim, our setting lever sits like that. There's a tab coming up through the back here that goes into that slot there. Now, on the back here there's a slot, a little fork. Now that's from the focus ring at the front of the camera, and I'm just turning that so it lines up with that screw, so that I've got so I know where to put everything. And then I'll turn this tab here, this brass tab, has to couple with that fork, so we want that to line up with the correct screw, which is there. Now I have to lower this in place without disturbing anything, and you can see why I've used those screws as an alignment jig. That's good. Keeping a bit of pressure on this, so I've got to pull this tab back slightly because it's just trapped under the case. That's it. So that's good. And holding this together with finger and thumb, I want to watch my depth of field pointers here as I move that tab around to make sure that they move correctly. Let's bring you where you can see. They should centre up. They're the same distance from the centre. That's good, means I've got that right. Now holding this firmly, because of course nothing's holding it together, and as you know, any mechanism that's not held together will fly to 1,000 pieces if you look the wrong way. Holding this firmly together, I'll get 1 screw to hold the back on, and that's another reason I've only used 3 alignment pins. And I'll unscrew the alignment pin from opposite that screw and pop one of my screws in there. Checking everything's coupled, that I got the brass tab for my rangefinder correctly positioned in the fork on the aluminium front piece. That's all moving smoothly. That's good. So the focus is nice and smooth now. There's no grittiness to it. Can remove those last 2 alignment pins I'd had in there. Replace them with the screws. And do those 4 screws up snugly. And turn my attention to the lens capsule itself. Generally with the lens capsule, all you're going to need to do is make sure that the external glass surfaces are clean and that the grease for the helical has been removed and will be replaced with fresh grease. But this part is all done. That's working nice and smoothly. Pop that to one side. Let's look at the lens capsule. We know that the grease is nasty, it's gritty, a bit dried out. very probably not the original grease, it's probably been serviced before. But depending on who'd serviced something, some rough people will just add grease. When grease is needed, they will add grease, rather than removing all traces of the old grease first, which is the preferred method, so that you get rid of any trapped dust and grit, because grease is great for trapping dust and grit. So I'm just wiping through this helical. This is a multi-start thread, it's quite steep pitch, and it's very clogged with dirty grease. Trying to get it as clean as I can. If I really wanted to get all traces of grease out of it, it would have to be soaked and degreased for some time, and then probably washed in the ultrasonic cleaner in a detergent in order to remove that last traces of grease. But we don't need to go to those extremes today. We just need to have it a lot cleaner than it currently is. That looks promising. Now the capsule itself. This is very greasy, which is another thing that leads me to believe it's not the original grease. It's quite black, so it's probably a graphite grease, and they wouldn't have used that in the original manufacturing process. The problem with any grease is it tends to not stay where you've put it. It has a mind of its own, and it crawls along the surfaces like some magic slime mould and finds its way to places you didn't want it to be. That's looking better. Alright, now I'll bring the two pieces back together and check the fit. It's pretty good. There's a bit of roughness to the feel of it. Let's just run a bit more solvent over those two surfaces. We may have disturbed some particles of grit that were buried down in the roots of the teeth. Yeah, even though those surfaces were coming up pretty clean, once they'd been screwed into each other, that's better. That feels much freer. I'll work that once or twice, and I'm going to wipe it out again. Watch for threads from your cotton buds too, because if they catch in the metal, they will happily just sit there and act as a high friction spot. That's absolutely smooth now. That's beautiful. That's a great feel. So I'm turning my attention to the lens itself, and I'm checking the action of the diaphragm to make sure it moves smoothly. And it does. I'd advise you not to let this thing snap back to fully closed. occasionally that will shear a pin off one of the blades if you do tricks like that, and they're a bugger to put back together, even if you've got parts. That cleaned up very nicely, that rear element. So I'll just do the same for the front, see how that looks. Once you have the outside glass clean, you're in a better place to assess the inner glass and whether that needs cleaning as well. Very frequently it doesn't. But until you've got nice clean windows to look through, you can't see. That looks very good. So far so good. We have our lens capsule, we have the body, we have the helical. Some grease for the helical. I usually put a little spot at about 5 or 6 positions around the outside. You don't need to absolutely fill the threads with grease, particularly if it's a heavy grease. That is very, very counterproductive. It'll just make the action very stiff to move, as it becomes difficult to get the grease to shear as you're moving it. I'm just running that on there now, get an idea of the feel of it. It's smooth. As I've worked that backwards and forwards, that grease is spreading out. It feels just right, feels good. So we'll unscrew that. We need to fit the capsule back into the body. Now that's a bit of an act, but it can be done. So I'm going to take a little bit of molybdenum paste, and in the coupling fork here where the diaphragm pin couples to it, and in this piece here where this runs on the guidepost inside the mount, I'll put a bit of molybdenum paste on those so that they'll run smoothly. Now, there's a lever here in the mount. You can see it wiggling. That needs to couple into this fork here on that diaphragm setting thing. And the post, visible here, has to fall into that slot there. They don't like to go together, so it's a jiggle to get them in. I like to get this piece in first and then turn the whole lens thing and get the other piece to drop into place. It's always a challenge. There's no easy way sometimes. Well, there are cheats you can use, but they require more work further down the track, so I'll do it this way if I possibly can. It's not quite picking that fork up in there. That's it. If I rotate the lens capsule slightly, it drops into place. And the diaphragm opens and closes smoothly. That's good. At the moment it's just sitting there, it's not trapped in place. So we need to get our helical component back on there and spun down a bit. That will do nicely. And then we need to put the screws in to hold this in place. So we had 3 screws with washers that hold that into the mount. I have one in place, so that means I can relax, it can't fall to pieces. I'll get the second one in place. And the third. It's not picking up. Why not? That's better. Now I'll check that the mount can be turned back to the infinity position, and it can. Right, that focus is all correct. I'm just checking that I have my 3 screws snug. I'll check the action. It's nice and smooth, no gritty feel. That's just great. That's just as it should be. Now, get these pieces in place. Again, I'm just interested in getting rid of any grit or stickiness. There's something very nasty and sticky on that lens front piece there. It doesn't want to move easily. That could be anything. Could be leftovers from somebody's toffee apple. Who knows what awful things have been spread onto that front of that lens. One more go with the naphtha, and if that won't move that muck, something else will. No, it's not going. Alright. Not acetone. I don't want to use acetone, I'll strip lacquer off that thing. It's got a scratch round there. That's it anyway, that's clean. Let's get it in place. There's a little red dot that heads up near the top, and this locks into place because there's a little tab on the back of it which just falls into place. And the little conical section that holds it all to the front of the lens. Just spin that down using a friction tool. Just tighten it into position. Focus is quite smooth. That's all good. So, I'll pull you out a little bit. Here we have our Retina IIIS camera. It was a bit of a casualty when it arrived here as a parts and repair camera. You might remember it was the whole lens assembly was coming adrift at the front. There was an awful lot of marks over here, turned out to be adhesive tape residue. On the top cover, the meter setting dial, the plastic cover was split and cracked. The cover was a bit misshapen, but you couldn't really see that. There was a sharp dent at this point, I've managed to get that out. We've still got the scratch in the top cover, but because the dent's been pushed out, that's by no means as obtrusive as it used to be. We have the leatherette patch back on the base plate. The nameplate was missing and we've got that back in place. The rewind knob was missing that black spacer. It had a stack of washers there instead. So now it's all good to go. And the camera is ready for a wipe out. Be given its repaired by sticker, and it'll be ready for a new owner. So that's how you reclaim a Retina IIIS camera that needs a little bit of love. Thanks for watching.